The two themes that I find most interesting in the Old Testament are grace and covenant. And grace can be found throughout all of the Old Testament. And it can also be found throughout Noah's story. God was getting ready to wipe out all of mankind because they were a hot mess, an absolute hot mess. And out of all of that, there was one man who was righteous and faithful, and that was Noah. And Noah found favor in God's eyes in Genesis 6:8. And Noah was not a perfect man by any means, but yet he still found favor in God's eyes, and God chose to save him and his family. Grace can also be found in Abraham and Sarah's story. In Genesis 12:3, despite all of Sarah and Abraham's disbelief, God still chose to keep his promise to them. And Moses doubted, God at every turn, but yet graciously God guided him in Exodus 4:13. God used Moses, who was a mere shepherd, to lead his people out of Egypt. Despite Moses saying, no, I not me, I can't do this, and God chose to listen and to walk with a man who, in his younger years, killed someone with his bare hands. But yet, God knew his heart and knew, that Moses could do this. Moses didn't know he could do it, but by golly, he did it. And he did it with God's help. The Israelites repeatedly rebelled against God, yet he graciously rescued them. And Israel, time and time again, they turned away from God. Time and time again. They did whatever they wanted. And they wanted, they lost protection, suffered great consequences, returned to God and begged him to rescue them over and over and over again. And sometimes there were lasting consequences for their poor decisions. But God showed grace, more grace than they deserved. And how awesome is that? Because God shows us grace every day. I know he shows me grace every single day. And I sin repeatedly over and over, but yet God shows us grace. That is just so amazing. The next one is covenant. And covenant can be found throughout all of the Old Testament. And I found this to be so interesting because a covenant is a promise which provides much of the framework on which the Old Testament unfolds, which is so cool. So major covenants are made through, so we talked about Abraham and Moses, and also, Moses and all of Israel, of course, and David. So each of these covenants involves promises God makes and expectations he has for his subjects, of the covenant, so of the promises. The Old Testament also looks forward to a new covenant, which is what the New Testament is all about, which is so cool. So God's promises to Abraham include, Abraham would be the father of great nations, which is Genesis 12:2. The land of Canaan, Genesis 12:7 and 17:8. Blessing of the nations through his offspring, which is so cool. In Genesis 12:3, and kingship, which is Genesis 17:6. So it is so cool to see how this starts, and when we get to the end, how it all ties in together. The covenant with Moses was later established between God and the nation of Israel, which shows the particular fulfillment of the covenant with Abraham. So in the aspects of the rising up of a nation from Abraham's seed, gotta remember that, Abraham's seed, it's so cool. God declares Israel to be his treasured possessions, and a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, on the condition that Israel will obey God's voice and keep his covenant, which is Exodus 19:5-6. The covenant made with David emphasizes the fulfillment of his promise of kingship to Abraham. So remember Abraham's seed? Oh, we got David now. And so the covenant with David, which is the promise, throughout this covenant, God gave David the assurance that his house and kingdom would be established forever. So forever, his established forever. So Jesus Christ comes from David. He is David's son. So it all ties in together. It is so cool. So in 2 Samuel 7, God promises to make David's name great, to plant Israel, to establish his throne forever. So in order for him to keep it, it comes from Jesus Christ. And how amazing how everything ties in from Abraham to David, and from David to Jesus Christ in the New Testament. It's just, I find it so amazing how everything ties in together. Thank you for listening.